Now, Pixies went through the entire first campaign, which is basically a World War II, where the Axii are the protagonists, and the Valen and everybody, all the the Alliance essentially pushed the bad guys back, or the antagonists back, and the Pixies were there on the last day when the war finally ended. So that ended the first campaign. Another race, the Zolorians, had a schism, and the Pixies evolved into the the Daisies.
The Daisies.
Also, yeah.
They went back to D.
Also picking a really just masculine butch name. They are a more mechanized and heavy infantry. I didn't represent the vehicles here because they take up too much space. There is a supporting mech platoon that is in addendum to this company's roster. So we had the crews and named, and this was more of like, if you watch an episode where you jump cut to like a side character, or maybe they get their own special focused one episode of a season, you're like, oh, that was cool. These weren't main characters by any means. We just had them, and we wanted personalities for the guys who were shuffling them around the battlefield and joining them in the firefights. But this is when the Valen, much like America coming out of World War II, or much like America coming into Desert Storm, were at their peak. They were veterans. They had their stuff together. They had really good technology, and they just got out of one fight. So jumping in to help an ally with their civil war wasn't too unknown to them. And we wanted to go with something that was mechanized. Like, these guys are able to take on tanks, and we use these beachheads as amphibious type troopers. So like we actually so we did a lot of river ops with this too, because the campaign we're going in was very divided. It's not D&D, or it's not a campaign.
That's adorable. Look at that.
Unless you throw in some maps. I am not. You can see Joe's art, and you can see my art.
No, that's it. That's awesome. That's a cool. Whatever, man. You made a map.
This is a planet map, right? So like
ocean. Look at some tip C.
Dude, yeah. So the names, it's rough. It's rough. So like, there was no random generators back then. And later, what's funny is we started. We started using the phone book.
I was just gonna say, I was like, that's when we started getting into real names, and we had people dying all the time. It's like, well, you'd be like, what are you gonna name this guy? I'd be like, and so I started like going through the phone book ahead of time. Oh, that's a good name. That's a good name. And I would literally jot down lists of names of characters that Yancey, like kind of thing. And that's where like Yancey's name came from. We literally used the phone book to like grab names and stuff.
This is just a small tactical map. It's like, hey, you're gonna fight with your platoon.
It looks like your son drew that map, Dom.
You can bag on my artistic abilities as much as you want.
You scribbled with a green mark. Get that off the screen.
You can bag on it as much as you want. It won't hurt my feelings. But this is how much effort I put into these games.
But that was a good. No, put that back up for real though. I'm kidding. But so that put it back up.
No, my feelings are hurt.
No, you son of a. Put it back up. I want to. So in this crappy map that Dom drew, you can still he numbered the hills like 310, 311, 312, 313. And I remember fighting on those hills. I'm like, oh, hill 313 is like over this way, or that's the main mountaintop hill. But like, I remember fighting on separate hills, and we'd be like, oh, that unit's over there on 311. We're over here on 310, like, kind of thing. That was, I mean, our attention to detail was kind of insane.
So I wanted,
however poorly drawn the maps were.
Maybe that's why so many people died, because of my poor artistic ability. You just couldn't really.
All of our characters are just looking at maps drawn by you, going, I don't know. I think they're over there. They're dying. So here's the idea here is that obviously we use these Gundam toys because they're amazing, but we didn't use them as giant spacesuits. Clearly, he's about the size of a GI Joe. So like, imagine just a guy with ridiculously heavy armor on.
It's a power suit.
So that's what power suit. Yeah. I mean, for instance, he's repaired his suit. Like, he's got multiple colored. I got a different arm. Like, he's been cobbled together. Like, he, like, kind of, and he's even got a daisy painted on his shield there.
That's beautiful.
So it's just like, that's the kind of thing. Oh, I just knocked over every guy behind him. He's even missing the shoulder armor on his other shoulder, for instance. He got blown off or whatever. But like, that was super fun. Bringing in those kinds of extra, kind of like the E-frames. Like, it's a different toy, but we're using it somehow work within the scale that we're playing in.
Now, this suit was a prototype experiment that we gave to them. It was called a Grasshopper Frame because it could just hop around. And it's from Scope Dog or Votos. It's incredibly fragile. And this thing, I bought it in like 1996. It has just gotten the living kick crap out of it, unfortunately. So it's not in the best condition. In fact, I'm pretty sure if I lift this off, oh, his leg stayed on, but his leg is just going to fall off. But the idea was this thing is cool and it's unique and it's black and it's such a atypical design to anything from G.I. Joe. We're like, hey, this is a prototype. And oh, by the way, we're kind of fighting these other aliens. Turns out their carapaces can be integrated with our technology. So we integrated bug carapace basically in with our technology. And the pilot would always come out, even though he's in like a jumpsuit, he'd just be covered in rashes and hives because he's having allergic reactions of being inside this thing. A little bit ridiculous. You probably have some sort of insulation between the pilot and the actual armor that's on the outside. But
well, it
still,
was a prototype.
We wanted that gritty desperation of like, we're using whatever we can to get the edge on the enemy. I'm sorry, your skin's going to be irritated. So this is Joker Company, and these are our more elite, right? A very unconventional. You can kind of see some. There's a guy sitting here on the stool here. Joe, I want to come back and talk about him in just a minute, though, and why he was both beloved and despised. So you see, sure. I chose the truck to represent what Joker Company is. We tried to keep the bearded people, it sounds like segregation, over to this unit because they were very unconventional. And you can see they've got painted weapons and they've got just stuff all over them because these were our elite company, were a blend of Rangers and Special Forces or SAS. And like Joe is alluding to earlier, he's like, I can't keep up with all these characters. We did have a lot of rosters going on. And you know, Jungle Punks, Dog, Pixies, Daisies, they all weren't simultaneous. That unit kind of evolved. Those were our boot regular infantry that were specialized on the way. Joker, however, we would play parallel to them, and we'll do another segment video kind of dialing in on them and who they are more. Now, the reason I brought old Chuck out here, Joe, well, why don't you tell me from a player perspective, whenever Chuck was in the first games, he was just kind of part of Joker, but later on, what was your feelings when you would see Chuck kind of pop up?
So Chuck was a character or an NPC, I would call him, I guess, of yours, that within Joker was good at his job. So he was an elite and he was doing things. And then very quickly he would start going off and doing his own things. And he was always sort of doing his own things. And it kind of like, so he was very frustrating because you'd just be like, Chuck, where are you? You're supposed to be here doing this with your squad. And he'd be like, oh yeah, I did that maybe. And then I ran over here and did this. And you're like, oh, well, okay. Well, that was weird. He was always doing deals. And yes. Like, it kind of came about as Dom slowly unveiled this character is that he was the CIA or anything like that. We were just like, it's an agency, as in he didn't even reveal the name of the agency.
Correct.
Like there's no name, you know? So we just knew them as agents. And the thing that would annoy me with that character later is that he would swoop in, grab some of my best guys, and then be like, I gotta go over here and go do this thing. And I'd be like, but I need those guys. And he'd run off and do something, get some of them killed, and then come back and be like, I took care of that, whatever unit was causing me problems, but 2 of your guys are dead, and also I have to go over here. The kind of joke is that like my character here, Pearson, who we didn't really talk about in the center here, eventually became one of those agents, like slowly like started going off with Chuck more and more often, and like, you know, and then eventually just wasn't in Joker anymore. And he was just look
at the hard comparison between your guy Pearson, maybe Yancey on the right, and then some of our straight boot infantry recruits, you know what I mean, like the early Dog Company, you know, Jungle Punks.
Well, for instance, Pearson's running around. I mean, he's got the laptop, so he's got like weird communication gears going on. But I mean, and I have this ridiculous Luke Skywalker thing on him, a vest, and just all kinds of stuff under there that he's like running around, and like, you know, they're just meant to be like killing machines essentially.
So like, what they were,
one-man armies, I would say.
This was a comparison to the early CIA or OCS in World War II, where, you know, America was still trying to introduce these things. And then you can compare it to Black Ops in Vietnam as well. Like the SOG, for instance, they would just go into other countries like Cambodia outside of Vietnam, and they'd run Black Op hit. I kept it more colorful and more humorous. Like he wasn't like a, you know, that smoking guy with the glasses, like they're just all numbers to me. You know what I mean? That's not what he was. Very, He was very charismatic. He'd pop in.
Oh no, yeah, he was very personable.
Hey,
That was the problem with him. You could never hate him.
Even though these guys are super cool, and even though these guys are really elite, they died a lot. Like there was a safe house mission where I just started off. Joe was like, "Yeah, you're in this little shack," and I just kicked in the door, and all these guys running in. And Joe was like, "This is my really cool guy." I'm like, "There's nothing you can do," and that was the end of that character. Like that was it.